Welcome to the Project Vanguard podcast, home of the community of veterans in energy, where we explore the journeys of veterans leading in energy. We're building American energy dominance through an all-the-above approach where energy security is national security, and our mission is to double the amount of veterans working in the energy industry. I'm your host, Kevin Doffing. Today's guest is Commander Kirk Lippold, U.S. Navy retired, who led the USS Cole when it was attacked by Al-Qaeda in 2000. The blast killed 17 sailors and nearly sank the ship. But under Kirk's leadership, the crew saved the vessel and brought it home under its own power. That day became a turning point, not only in America's understanding of asymmetric threats, but also in Kirk's life. Since then, he's become a national voice on homeland security, energy resilience, and what it means to lead in moments that matter. He's briefed Congress, advised senior officials, and stayed laser-focused on one question. What does national security look like when the battlefield is everywhere, from cyberspace to supply chains to the grid itself? In this episode, we talk about what happened in Yemen, but more importantly, what came next. We get into the leadership lessons that still apply to clean energy projects today, the vulnerabilities in our infrastructure, and why America needs to treat energy security as a nonpartisan issue. We also talk about how veterans can shape the next era of energy, not just through service, but through systems. By building trust in rural communities, leading energy infrastructure on the ground, and standing up for an all-the-above approach that reflects how real-world energy works. If you care about security, leadership, and the future of American power, this is one of the most important conversations we've had yet. Let's get into it. So, Kirk, let's get into it. Really appreciate you being here today. The Project Vanguard podcast is all about veterans and energy. And one of the things that I think that we're uniquely positioned for as veterans working in this industry is the national security imperative and mission and message. I think the industry's tried to do it for a long time, but it doesn't quite come across as well. What's been your experience with delivering that message to people inside or outside the industry without a military background?
Well, the easiest thing in the first statement I always like to use, Kevin, is energy security is national security. If you don't have the ability to power a society, you have to have the ability to power an economy. You have to have that ability to power industries. All those things tied together are what make for a national security infrastructure. So when you have energy, when you have sources of energy, diverse, robust, they're capable of withstanding shocks to the system, whether it be market forces or otherwise, you're going to have that national security that I think everyone really expects the government to provide for them.
I think you're absolutely right. I forget who said it, but energy is 5% of GDP, but it's the first 5%. You don't have anything else without that.
It's very true. When you look at it, that 5% is what undergirds everything. And I tell people, look, national security is the foundation of everything that happens. Because when you look at it, for those that can go back on the morning of 9/11, you didn't care about how bad traffic was. You didn't care what your retirement account or stock portfolio was. That morning, you really only cared about two things. Is my nation safe and is my family safe? So that national security piece, which starts with having the energy to power your society and your country, is what undergirds and makes everything else possible for us.
Yeah, I mean, my sense of energy security was really based around a singular conversation I had when I was deployed in Iraq. I'm sitting around with a bunch of heads of the sub-tribes, and we're talking about when is the market going to reopen? And I'm like, we can't reopen the market. Last time we had one, there was a vehicle-borne IED, and VBIDs is a word I do not like to say lightly. And they're like, well, but we need the economy. I'm like, I know, but we need security before we can allow that to happen. They're like, but if we don't have our economy, how are we ever going to be secure? I'm like, this isn't a chicken and egg. We've got to provide a lockdown security or you're never going to be able to have the economy that you want here locally. And this is just in a village outside of Ramadi. But, it just really spoke to me that like, that's step one. And if you don't have that stable security, you don't have anything.
I think you're absolutely right. Regardless of what service you may be in or have experienced in your life, look at it as the Navy. We deploy around the world, and we have to have energy sources from a variety of ports to be able to come out to either refuel the ship or for us to pull into port to be able to project that power and ensure that the sea lanes of communication stay open. And we're seeing that play out in real time today, even as close as yesterday. And look at what's going on through the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, a Red Sea, and the Gulf of Aden, where the Houthi rebels are disrupting maritime shipping, forcing them to now add 6 days to the trip to go around the Horn of Africa
Hmm.
to get from Europe to the Middle East or vice versa.
So take us back to your days on the USS Cole. I didn't realize till we were talking that the reason it was in port was for fuel resupply. I thought it was a mechanical issue or something like that. And being in the Army, I just assume the ships just always work. Like I know nothing about them, and I'm glad they do.
Well, take a guided missile destroyer like USS Cole, which is an Arleigh Burke class destroyer, and they typically will carry a little over 500,000 gallons of fuel.
Hmm.
When we deployed out of the United States, we were about 6 weeks behind the George Washington Aircraft Carrier Battle Group that went straight to the Middle East. We operated in the European theater in the Mediterranean for about 4 weeks, with 2 weeks of additional operations up in the Adriatic off the former Republic of Yugoslavia. And then eventually it was time for us to get to the Middle East for operational reasons. We went at double the normal speed. So rather than a leisurely 12-knot transit, we were doing 20 to 25 knots, depending on how ahead or behind our projected movements were.
Hmm.
We went through the Suez Canal on the 9th of October, raced down the Red Sea, and then we were off the port of Aden, Yemen, because when we cleared the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, rounded the corner, headed up toward the Strait of Hormuz, where we were going to pull into Bahrain to get our in-theater briefings before we went to the North Arabian Gulf, we were below 50% fuel. So we were already 250,000 gallons down. Navy ships typically, unlike, our parents used to tell us, look, your tank in your car runs better on the top half than it does on the bottom half. And so the Navy ships are the same way. We like to stay well above 70% fuel if at all possible. And why? Because if an operational necessity drives us to be somewhere, we can not only get there, but then we can sustain ourselves for days, if not weeks, slowly driving around to ensure that we can maintain that. And a good example of that came when the Maersk Alabama and Captain Phillips was kidnapped.
Hmm.
We had to sit there and operate. USS Bainbridge had to operate for days as they slowly brought the pirates closer and closer to be able to capture and kill them. So having that long-term ability to stay on station without support really makes a difference. In our case, at the halfway point, if you look at where Aden, Yemen is, it's halfway between the Mediterranean and halfway between the Middle East. That's why we pulled in that morning to take on a little over 250,000 gallons of fuel.
Interesting. I get it a lot. I guess because I work in clean energy or renewables, people think I don't like oil and gas, but I'm in Houston. I owned an oil and gas supply company for a decade. Like, I'm a big fan. I also know that we're not electrifying combat air vehicles or, a boat that's consuming 500,000 gallons of fuel very easily. When you think about the electrification, the molecule side, how do you see this interplay, good or bad, for our national security?
I think right now, when you look at it, if we in fact want to achieve what they call energy dominance throughout our energy infrastructure in the United States, we're going to have to tap into all sources of energy. And the key thing I look at is, a lot of people say, well, it's either fossil fuels or it's electrification. No, you have to have an integrated approach using both of them to your advantage. The more you can gain green energy and power, regardless of where it comes from, number one, you're going to get better at the technology because practice makes perfect. You're going to be, right now, China is well ahead of us when it comes to electric and battery technology. We are playing catch up.
Mm-hmm.
And so consequently, we're behind. But you have to remember, a lot of people like to poo poo the green energy side, but I look at it and say no, because everything we use green energy wise allows us to use those other fuel sources, especially fossil fuels, which has the most energy per pound right now, to be able to use that for our jets, for our ships, and for other things, trains, for example. You're going to have to use those fossil fuels for the foreseeable future. So you have to have an integrated approach to energy security. You have to have that integrated approach that allows you to develop the technology in the green energy world. By the same token, you are going to have to use fossil fuels until technology can eventually and hopefully catch up.
Right. And I just to think about, like Japan, I think about Europe, where we need to be able to resource our allies that don't have the same access domestically to fuel supplies, right? Even as they electrify, to your point, they still need those things. And we need to be able to be a partner on the global stage and supply that.
Absolutely. And we saw that most recently with the February 2022 invasion of Russia into Ukraine, largest land war on the European continent since World War II. And what happened? For the first 2 years of that conflict, Europe could not quit themselves of getting Russian oil
Mm-hmm.
and gas. That is an unacceptable compromise. They were fueling the war machine that they were opposed to. They didn't like the instability that Russia was creating, but they couldn't get off of it. And they didn't want to get energy from us because we were in a mode where we were saying, well, we kind of need to preserve it. We want to turn toward green energy. We don't want to be exporting as much as we used to. And I think we actually undermined our national security in doing that rather than enhancing it.
Yeah, no, the spigot should have been turned on and we should have been supporting them as best we can. I think that's also, especially now with like the impact of tariffs and the instability that that's created, that they're now looking at, okay, maybe America isn't the trusted partner that we need for this. And if we decouple our economies, we're going to decouple our national security apparatus too.
Well, I think to a degree, the whole thing with the tariffs and the decoupling, number one, whether we like it or not, the world has global connections now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're not going to go to the flat earth. We're just never going to get there. But by the same token, I think you're going to always see an integrated global economy. But what COVID taught us was that every nation has to develop its ability that for some period of time, if they're cut off from the world, whether it is through an event like COVID or conflict or some other reason, they have to have the resources to be independent and maintain themselves as a country, as an economy, and as a society, as well as their own national security interests for some period of time until globally we can reconnect with all of our allies and friends. So, in some ways, having that energy independence to each nation is not decoupling from each other, but it's kind of leveling and saying, hey, we're going to have to look out to ourselves for a certain degree, and we're going to have to protect certain industries in order to be able to do that. They may not be large permanent ones, but they have to exist for some period of time. And I think that's just a realistic approach. Nations want to feel secure. They want to feel like they can provide for their people. But as you mentioned at the beginning, they have to do that by having that foundation of national security because everything else stems from it.
Well, it's interesting. So, I have some friends that do a lot of project development, even some friends that are doing it in Nigeria. And they were talking about, they don't like getting power from the capital, Lagos controls things, yada, yada. And they're like, so we're going to build a lot of solar. And I'm like, that's great. But also realize like there's a political risk there because if you're not dependent on them, even for intermittent power, they're not going to like that you're doing that. Right. So, like, there's the intra country security issues even there. I know a guy in Indiana who I'd never thought about. He's like, I want Indiana to be a net exporter of power. And I was like, whoa, what are you right now? They're like, oh, we're a massive importer, massive importer. And I was like, I've never thought about a state within the country thinking of themselves in that way. But, that because of their economic development goals and things like that, that's one of the things they were trying to do to incentivize businesses to have cheaper prices in state, and so that was a big thing for them. So as we see this push for independence, I think it's not just globally or nationally. It's also, regionally.
I think you're absolutely right, and I can give you another example is I made a proposal at one time for the state of Nevada. Let's face it, the nuclear test range that we used to set off weapons at is no longer being used. The unique thing about the state of Nevada is no matter where you go, if you drill down far enough, in probably 80+% of the state, you'll tap water. But if you go out onto
Huh.
the test range, you drill down, you're going to get water, but it's going to be alkaline. Well, if we're not going to use that area anymore, go out to that test site, build a couple of 15 or three 15 gig nuclear reactors. Bring the water up, clean it, run it through, cooling, go 5 miles out, put it back down into the water table. You have a recycling, self sustaining system. Once you build a
Hmm.
couple of those out on that site, you not only power the state of Nevada, but you will begin to power the Southwest United States. So there is opportunity to do there, but as you mentioned, now you're going to start running into the political interests. You're going to run into some of the fossil fuel industries that oppose that kind of approach because they don't want to do it. And when you looked at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, hey, for years we were hampered by the fact that they would not open Yucca Mountain. We have to find a repository for all that nuclear waste. And I'm one of those that said, hey, bring it to Yucca. Let's learn from the French. Let's open a reprocessing plant, learn how to deal with the byproduct, which is plutonium, which can be stored in those casks, put in the mountain. And then what we do is we start taking those rods, and that's how we fuel the next generation with these small modular reactors that we're seeing. Really, the technology is beginning to come out by leaps and bounds, and pretty soon we're going to see nuclear power begin to power this nation in a green energy fashion, but we need to get there. And in the meantime, we also need to rely on those other sources that you mentioned, the solar powers, the offshore wind, the onshore wind. All of those should be used to develop that more diverse and robust and flexible green energy and national security energy system.
So I've never fully understood this. Again, just dumb army guy. We've been using nuclear for a very long time in our sub fleet and in the Navy. How have we not translated that, or have we? And I just don't understand it. What are those reactors like compared to when I think of the new Vogel plant?
Okay, I think what a lot of people don't understand is when it comes to the military, they can afford to invest almost unlimited resources to ensure the high quality of the systems, the training, the maintenance, the personnel, in order to make sure those systems stay 100% safe. When it comes to industry, I think even though it has been decades now since 3 Mile Island, there's inherent mistrust in the system by the American people, thanks to Hollywood and all these others. I mean, you say radioactive and everyone goes nuts, when in fact, the body is an amazing ability to absorb some low level, not much, but it can. But by the same token, I think that industry, as we gain the technology, is going to be able to afford those small modular reactors. And there is no reason in my mind why we can't take some of the technology that the Navy has exercised in submarines and aircraft carriers and turn that into energy power sources for industry itself.
I mean, it makes sense. How much waste comes out of this? I mean, up until a few years ago, and I just started meeting more vets at Westinghouse and other places like that, I was anti-nuclear. So I kind of got brought around by people just, laying some things out for me. So I just didn't know. But even now, I don't know how much waste it actually puts out. How much are we trying to use, to send to Yucca Mountain?
I couldn't give you an exact figure, but what I can tell you is in those cooling ponds that we have around the United States next to reactors, each one of those is a vulnerability. All it's going to take is somebody coming in there, which, as you mentioned, we have people around the world that mean to do us harm. And that is a potential area where if they were to broach it, they could spread radioactive material. It would cause more psychological harm than anything else. But that's why we need to find a repository where we can bring that in, process it, and bring it down and store it long term until we figure the technology to actually break down that waste.
Well, I just think about, I had beers a few months ago with a bunch of guys, some, lieutenant colonels and a full bird from Army Futures Command. And we were just talking about it. And I was like, man, I just feel like Ukraine is what the Spanish Civil War was to World War II, right? Like we're just seeing what World War III is going to look like, but it's happening in Ukraine right now, right? Like as an infantryman, when they're telling me, yeah, one way you can get yourself killed really easy is when you go to the bathroom if you don't dig a hole. I was like, what do you mean dig a hole? They're like, you go pee on a tree, that's a heat signature for like 4 or 6 hours that they're going to find you by with a drone and your entire unit's gonna be gone, and just the way that they're, like, spooling and unspooling fiber cable and just everything that they're doing, and I think this kinda came to a head because it was very visible a few weeks ago when they struck inside of Russia and got those high-tech bombers with basically some drones out of the back of a box truck. Where do you see kind of that implication around what you just said with the nuclear ponds, our exposure? Where do we have to go as we secure our energy sources in maybe a way that we haven't before?
Let's go back to the famous statement: necessity is the motherhood of invention. When you look, Ukraine, their back is against the wall. It is literally the survival of their nation. So they're going to try any and everything to try and deter the enemy, which is Russia. And that's why we have seen, let's face it, as a ground guy, even as a Navy guy, I understand that what Ukraine has done has changed the face of land warfare forever. And in many ways, the Houthi rebels, by exercising drones against shipping, has changing sea warfare forever. Because now we don't know how those things are going to be used. Because just like with you guys, you don't need a complete kill to stop someone. You need a mission kill. Take out their radars, take out their weapon systems, take out the missile directors. And guess what? The ship's going to stay afloat, but it's no longer as combat effective as it once was. And I think that's where we have to be very careful. When it comes to energy, hopefully we don't have a major incident, but we need to be investing in the R&D, the research and development. And, over the last 20 years, we have cut the vast majority of what used to be called FFRDCs, your federally funded research and development centers, that truly many were focused on energy, others in different aspects of our society and our future. We need to start bringing those back because R&D is what builds the future. R&D is what put a man on the moon going from vacuum tubes to transistors. And we need to make that leap where circuit boards, what's the next step going to be? You invest the R&D and that's where it's going to take us. And some of that literally has to be supported by the federal government. Saying industry's got to do it now, no, the federal government creates the conditions for industry to be able to succeed, and it's not going to be any different when it comes to energy sources.
No, I get it. I do some coaching with university spinoff, but it's on like the water purification side. But it's interesting to see how that works because early stage tech does not have an obvious profit motive. I mean, like you kind of know, okay, this is the market, whatever. But like by the time you're 3 years in, it's so different. You would never get away with doing that at a company. And also, how much innovation has ever been created that gets shelved? Xerox doesn't want the mouse or Kodak doesn't want the digital camera because they feel like it cuts into their core business, and it did. So, I mean, innovation, that step function changes things, doesn't belong at industry. Incremental progressive change towards scaling and reducing costs is great, but these big changes have to come from the public side. And it always has. Even fracking came out of Department of Energy grants. And thank God it did. But I mean, it requires the federal government to be involved with a longer term return timeline. They're looking in decades of sustaining the tax base.
It's going to take a bipartisan commitment that we're going to start R&D and we're going to keep it funded. And I think that in many ways, Doge was missing the mark because when you look at the number of hits that they took in the R&D side when Doge came through, I think that was a bit short-sighted. They may not have seen the immediate benefit, therefore we could cut it back, scale it back, or eliminate it. I think that's penny wise and pound foolish, so to speak. So I think that we need to reinvigorate that process and really do it. The other advantage that happens is when you invest into R&D and some of those technologies actually begin to bear fruit, you're now creating the conditions out in industry to do that. Let's face it, who does a lot of R&D that comes out in the world and eventually shows up in the civilian sector? It's on the Department of Defense side. All these young men and women that are out there, they're using some of the latest, greatest, and coolest tools.
Mm-hmm.
And at one time we thought wasn't going to be possible. What do you mean? A glass panel in an aircraft? And next thing you know, that transitions to jets. Now it's transitioned all the way down to general aviation. And that's how the planes are being built today, whether it's a little single engine bonanza
Mm-hmm.
or whether it's the most sophisticated fighter in the world, the F-22 and the F-35. So I think what you see is when you make those investments, that is where first veterans get to touch it. And then when they choose to want to say, hey, look, I've done my time, whether that was for the 4 years or the 24 years, and they're transitioning out, they sometimes bring with them technical skills that otherwise would not be available to industry right away.
Yeah. So take me back. What was your journey into the military like? What made you decide that this is what you wanted to do? And did you know that you were going to stay in this long?
I had no idea. My journey started in Carson City, Nevada. I always felt the desire to serve. I don't know why. I applied to all 3 service academies, Annapolis, West Point, and the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. I ended up picking the Navy, went there for 4 years. And at the end of that 4 years, I think I was like a lot of my classmates and said, hey, I'm going to do my minimum time, which is the 5 years, and then I'm going to get back out into the real world.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 5 years turned into an opportunity to get my master's degree, which gave me time. I was going to be at the 9.5, 10-year point. Well, geez, I'm halfway there toward a potential 20-year retirement. At that point, the hook was set.
Yeah.
And
Sunk
guess
cost.
what? I decided, okay, but I also took the approach, if you're going to be in now, and I was at that 7-year point getting ready to accept orders to Navy postgraduate school. I also said, if you're going to be in, you're all in. You are committed 110%. And I basically told my detailers from that point, I don't care where you send me in the world. I want the best job on the best ship anywhere. And that's what led me to have some incredible opportunities. For example, I was the commissioning operations officer on USS Arleigh Burke, the Navy's first Aegis guided missile destroyer. Aegis is it is literally the integrated weapon system that for the first time took every single system on board, anti-air, anti-surface, anti-submarine, gunfire support, and integrated them into one combat system, the centerpiece being that phased array radar that you see in 4 panels on the ships today.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at it, that ship has now become the standard for the United States Navy and is the most successful shipbuilding program in our history. And it was from that that I went and did my executive officer and then ultimately was given, blessed with the command of USS Cole that obviously in a defining moment, my crew did exactly what they were supposed to. And what's amazing is after that incident, watching all of them transition back to the civilian world at some point. Many went on and retired, and some said, hey, this incident fundamentally changed who I am. I want to get out. And then watching them go through the process of what am I going to do next? And so that was kind of my journey, and I went through it myself. When it came time for retirement, what do I want to do? And you really...
What do you want to do when you grow up?
Well, look, when you get out of the military, you're actually blessed because for the first time in your life, you have the knowledge and experience to ask yourself 2 things. What have I done in life that I've enjoyed so much I want to do again? Or what do I want to learn about in life that I can go out and do it and then make a career out of that? So pick one of those and go do it. And oh, by the way, the only other question you have to ask is, will either of those pay the bills? Otherwise, go find a job that pays the bills till you can pursue what you love to do or pursue what you want to learn about, and then go do it. Life is opportunity, but it incurs risk. You may have burdens that you may have a family and everything else you have to take care of. Those need to be taken into consideration. But sometimes a little sacrifice up front pays huge benefits in the long run. And I think veterans more than most understand what sacrifice is about and how it can pay dividends and benefits long term in life.
Yeah, I think that that's great. I think I came out with the worst attitude, which was, "Do you know who I am? Don't you know who I am?" And the answer is nobody cares.
It's exactly right, as it should be.
Right.
One of the great things about the military is that we're civilians, we volunteer to serve, and we get out. And guess what? We're a civilian again. And I don't care whether you're an E3 getting out or whether you're an O10 as a 4-star admiral in general. Your name is now John. Welcome back to civilian life. Get your collar device off your sleeve and reconnect with the society that gave you the privilege to serve our nation.
Yeah. No, and I think luckily the GI Bill provides a great time to go take a knee for a lot of folks to go get your 4-year, go get a master's. A lot of officers I talk to like, hey, an MBA is a great thing to just take a knee and reset, widen your aperture, see what opportunities are out there, and unlearn some jargon. Same could be said for a 4-year bachelor's if you're junior mill enlisted and, just hadn't had those opportunities afforded you. Now you have a really great opportunity in front of you.
Absolutely. I used to always tell my sailors, look, if you're getting out because you don't like the Navy, I'm going to do everything I can to try and retain you. If you're getting out because you say, I've been accepted to this college, that's what I would do is say, What can I do to help you? What do you need? A letter of recommendation? Do you need anything? What courses are you going to take? What do you want to specialize in? Because education, like a birthday, once you get education, it can never be taken away from you. It is yours for the rest of your life. And what you choose to do with it will define your future.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. The only thing that I see, I went to my first Student Veterans of America National Summit. Have you ever been to that event?
I have not.
So really interesting, very massive. I thought there would be 3 to 500. There was like 5,000 people there. I think it's in Colorado Springs this coming January, but every veteran I met, we're talking and I'm like, "Oh, when do you get out?" They're like, "I graduate in a couple months or, the end of this semester." I'm like, "Oh, great. What are you gonna do?" They're like, "I don't know. I think I'm gonna start figuring that out in sometime around April. I graduate in May." And I'm like, "How long you been in school?" 3, 4 years. I'm like, "Oh, buddy, you you gotta get a job while you have a job. Your job has been student. Like, don't wait for this job to end and then you start looking for a job."
Yep. I mean, 6 months out is when you really ought to be. When you're out, you're thinking about it and figuring out what have I learned that I want to apply. And then you start 6 months out, you start saying, where can I go to work? And start laying that path out. Yeah, you're going to get through final exams. Stop sweating it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, your GPA isn't going to mean squat to most companies. So guess what? Go out there and get your hands dirty again and start working. And like any job, there are going to be days where you'd be rather kind of dating myself a little here. You'd rather be announcing the blue light special at Kmart. Okay. But at the end of the day, you're back again contributing to society and really contributing to what makes us the greatest nation in the world.
So, since you've gotten out, what's been keeping you busy? We really got connected around that piece that you wrote around offshore wind. So, talk a little bit about that, but what's keeping you busy these days?
The main thing is when I retired, I did not want to go do business development for any defense contractors. So I struck out into the world of inspirational leadership speaking. Being the captain of USS Cole when it was attacked, really, when you want to talk about widening your aperture, I took that tragic event, which happened 11 months before 9/11, and really said, okay, as leaders out there today, what are the key things that you need to apply? Leadership is a skill that is practiced and learned. It is not a natural skill. Nobody becomes a natural pilot. They get good at being a pilot by practicing it over and over. A leader gets to be a good leader by practicing those tenets over and over, developing in your people a sense of personal responsibility, making sure that you give them the 5 tools that I talk about, Make sure they know what their job is, how well you want that job done, the standards of performance, then giving them the training tools and time to do the job right. And then you go out there and you begin to build your skill set in the world of leaders. You make decisions, you take risk, you trust in your people. You sit there and do all those things necessary because when you practice those things over and over every single day, making mistakes, learning from them, picking yourself up by your bootstraps, you develop that sense of resiliency, that ability to go forward, and people begin to turn to you because you're now possessing and showing them that you have the skills to manage them, to lead them, and to take care of them all in one big ball. And that's what really matters.
I like it. So how much of your time goes into the motivational speaking right now?
Well, to be honest, it's a feast or famine business. I mean, I normally will go be either the opening or closing keynote speaker for a lot of industries throughout the country.
Mhm.
If there's one thing I've learned in doing it now for 17 plus years is there are a million ways to make $1 million in this country. You just have to be willing to take the risk and learn about an industry to be able to do that. And right now, in many ways, traveling around the country, by busy months, obviously, April, May, and June, because that's when we do conferences, and then September, October, November in the fall.
Mhm.
So, that's when I'm kind of on the road and getting used to airport lounges and, being packed into my nice airplane seat like everyone else.
Yeah.
But hey, I love what I do. I have no intention on retiring because to be able to connect to audiences and help those companies develop their internal leaders, to me, is such a give back to our country and our society. I just never want to stop. As long as I'm willing to put up with travel, I'm willing to go out there and do that.
Nice.
And I think in many ways, you know, you have to lead your life by example. I like to not only just do the leadership speaking, but I also want to stay engaged because ever since the attack on Cole, I view the world through that lens of national security. All the other stuff is just chatter because national security to me is defining. And therefore, as I mentioned at the beginning, energy security is national security. And fortunately, I was given a few opportunities to be able to plug into the energy world to take a look at it. I have done the fossil fuel side. I have done the green energy side with this article that I recently did in Real Clear Defense about offshore wind power. Those are the kind of things that are going to help develop and sustain us and make sure that we have the energy security that we need for our national security.
No, I love it. Talk more about that offshore piece.
Well, when it comes to the offshore piece, part of it is when you go at sea, when you're offshore, what normally happens all the time? Wind. So you have nature providing you with a force for free that you could take advantage of. And part of the problem you run into is all these people, oh, we absolutely love and embrace green energy, but they fall subject to the NIMBY.
Yeah.
Okay, not in my backyard. I don't want things destroying my beautiful, pristine
Yeah.
horizon. Well, sometimes you have to take a look and say, those things can go far enough out where you aren't even going to see them. Our continental shelf, especially on the east coast of the United States, typically goes out between 40 to 50 plus miles. That's plenty of room to be able to go down, anchor those wind turbines, to be able to operate, and then bring it ashore to sustain not only the seaboard and local communities, but go inland as well. So I think that there's huge opportunity with the offshore wind, and I think we should continue to leverage it because it drives and supports an entire industry.
Mhm.
It drives and supports the shipbuilding industry, which you've heard a lot of talk about here in the United States, needs to be revamped and rebuilt essentially. So we're sustaining that. You've got the cable industry. You've got the actual wind turbines themselves. So when you look at the entire supply and industry chain supporting offshore wind, the number of jobs that have been created just in that one field of green energy is huge. And it is a great opportunity, especially for veterans considering getting out, to go into, because let's face it, a lot of young men and women, when they choose to serve, they join because they don't know what they want to do in life. So let's go learn a skill. And if the one thing that the military does is it trains you in skill set And then as you get more senior, you learn management skills and then you learn leadership skills. So when you get out, again, whether you're at the 4-year or 24-year point, when you look at what you bring to industry, look, I can teach you any one of those industries. What I can't teach you is the managerial and leadership skills that the military gives people. And so that's why veterans are so desirable out there. They have an incredible work ethic. They know how to show up on time. They know how to contribute positively to any business that they're going to work for. Because one of the things, and you'll get this, is I tell industry all the time, look, every single person that walks through your door every day and comes to work, you chose to hire.
Mm-hmm.
In the military, they're called orders, not requests.
Yeah.
So guess what? Every single person that comes up the brow and reports aboard my ship, from the seaman recruit to the number 2 executive officer, I have to meld them into a team. And when you report aboard the ship, just like you report aboard an Army unit, you learn to become part of that team and be a positive contributor to it. Once you learn that skill set and you bring that to industry, that's what they're looking for. So veterans, not only is industry seeking the skill set, but they're looking for those managerial skills, and you're going to be far ahead of your contemporaries on that point.
No, I love that. We get a lot of veterans and transitioning service members that'll listen to this. What's your piece of advice for them as they're looking at this industry?
As you're looking at this industry, the great thing about it right now is most of these industries need people. Guess what that means? They're going to pay to teach you and make you learn their industry to do that. So one of the things is you're going to get to learn perhaps a new skill set. You're going to build on the skill set you may already have, but the industry wants people. Let's face it, we're beginning to onshore our industries back into the United States today. There's a huge infusion of money, somewhat driven by that whole tariff war thing, because we need to bring it back. This is what's going to be happening over the next 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to onshore again a lot of the skill sets that we sent overseas to other countries. We're going to start bringing them back because we're going to be paying people that living wage. Whether it's union or non-union, they're going to start getting that. So it really doesn't matter. And what really is going to be important is you're now going to be part of building the future for our country. And in the green energy world, whether it's offshore wind, onshore wind, whether it is electrification, all of those industries right now need people. And when you look at what you want to do, they will teach you the skill set you need.
No, I love that. Yeah, no, training is a huge thing. And that was the thing I always learned being in the military was just be trainable.
Oh, that's real easy. Shut your mouth and listen. Okay?
Easier said than done.
True, but when you don't understand something, ask. Instructors, when they stand up there, don't want to be in transmit mode. They love it when people say, excuse me, I'm not quite understanding how you made the dot connection between A, B, C, and D. Could you explain that again so that I can truly understand it? Because I want to know, how does that electron get from point A to point D through those other 2 steps? Or mechanically, how do those pieces integrate because I'm not quite understanding it? When you start doing those things, sometimes, look, education is not always fun, but when you learn something, you get something more important in life. You get a sense of satisfaction. You get a sense of achievement. And those are things that people want more than having fun.
No, I think you're right. Kirk, I really appreciate you making your time today. I know you're a busy man. I think we caught you in the doldrums between your busy seasons, so I'm glad we could work that out. Thanks for being a guest on the podcast today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And to all those veterans that are out there, take a good look. The world is your oyster. There is opportunity abounds out there, and take a little risk because it will pay huge dividends in the future, especially in the world of green energy.
Yep. And if you're looking to get into this industry, make sure you join us if you haven't already at projectvanguard.com. You'll get invited to our Slack community. There's hundreds of veterans that already work in this industry. They can help you understand where you would best fit and help you get outside the whole AI chatter of, your resume and the black hole that is just dropping things into the internet. have a friend at the company you want to work at that can walk down and tap another person on the shoulder and say, hey, here's another person that we should consider. That's what I found to be the most successful pathway into finding and landing those jobs is working your network. And we've built that network for you. It's here. Take advantage of it. But that's it for today. Kirk, thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to the Project Vanguard podcast. If this episode sparked something for you, share it with someone who's ready to think differently, whether it's about an all-the-above energy approach, how energy security is national security, or the veteran workforce in our industry. If you believe what we're building, a quick review goes a long way. You can do that wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, keep up the fire.